Well, welcome to Jan-Piet's Choice today. We're going to play the piano for you. We, that is the Armidale piano duo. We here in Armidale in Australia, we have the Armidale piano duo, and not surprisingly, we're two pianists playing on one piano. And we play all kinds of interesting things. But we specialize in pieces that were not originally written for piano, but for something else. And we're going to play some of a piece today that was likewise not written for piano duet. And we have some different movements. And I have a feeling many people may not know this music at all, which makes it all the more interesting as far as I'm concerned. The Armidale piano duo is my dear friend and colleague Lena Schmalz, and indeed myself. So here's one very short little piece that we're going to play, and see if you can work out what this could possibly be. It's short, isn't it? Shall we play it one more time? Any ideas? Does anybody actually know it? So I know this music inside out, and it's of course that and that. No, nobody, right?
Nursery rhyme.
A nursery rhyme?
It sounds very regal to me, as if somebody's processing.
That's a very nice. I like the the nursery rhyme one. I have to think about. The regal one I like in a way very much. Yeah, like a bit. You want to say like a sort of royal sort of march.
Well,
Like a royal wedding march or something.
yeah, something like that.
But it hasn't finished, has it?
No.
No, it has not really finished, because it finishes like in a way that it doesn't really finish, right? Musicians, music theorists say it finishes on what?
On the dominant.
On the dominant, yes. It's like we could easily make it finish. Shall we play one time and make it finish? I was trying to make a joke. I don't think it's better at all. It's terrible.
It doesn't, you've just pushed it to the end, that's all.
But Megan, of course, is right that the piece is not well finished. In the bigger picture of the complete work, the story goes on, right? But yeah, regal sort of thing, yeah. Can you identify a composer? Can you have an idea which composer this might? Does it sound like a particular composer that you know or don't know? What sounds like a composer I don't know?
Yeah, it sounds like him.
It sounds like a composer you don't know, right? No, you know this. You know this composer really well. I know that.
It's not Handel, is it? No.
No, but it sounds Handelian, does it not? Like this royal sort of march thing.
Yeah.
that makes you think a bit of Handel in a way.
Yeah.
Like, is it almost a bit the same sort of thing as this? That sort of thing a little bit. That sort of movement and that sort of chords.
Was that a hint, by the way, that it's French?
No.
Might be either Bach or Beethoven.
Bach or Beethoven. Could be either, because both have this kind of monumental quality at times, right? Both can do this march-like sort of thing.
I'm just thinking of the things you've been teaching me.
Okay. So, either Bach or Beethoven, because... Okay. Well, if you had to go with either, whom would you go with? Bach, because it sounds a bit boring.
It's more formal than Beethoven.
It's more formal than Beethoven. It's less adventurous.
Yeah.
If it was Beethoven, you would have expected more strange chords, adventure sort of thing. Is that right?
More emotion, in a way.
More motion, in a way. It's a bit sort of not very emotional, is it?
Well, it is, but not the same sort of... Oh, somebody else talk.
Okay, somebody else's turn. It is. Yeah, I agree with you. I very, very much agree. It's in a way very emotional, but maybe in a more controlled way than Beethoven would be. Is that fair to say? We'll play it one more time because it's so cute. But this is really about other things. But one more time. But with the original ending, without a funny sort of... Yeah, okay. For me, it's almost inconceivable. I mean, I'm not trying to boast or be disrespectful. For me, it's almost inconceivable that anybody does not know this music. Because I have heard it so many... No, please don't think that. Because I've heard it so many times. And that's partly it's my background in many ways. Partly simply because I grew up in a certain country where this music is ridiculously and in a way inexplainably popular. It's popular for good reasons, it's very good music, but there's many other pieces that are very good pieces of music that in that country are much less well known. And in other countries, other pieces of music are much more famous. When I first, many years ago, started teaching in America outside New York City, I taught many of these music appreciation classes. In a way, I did in a different way what I do here every Wednesday. And I had so much fun doing that. But what I learned from teaching in America, real quick, was in America, until proven otherwise, either you have been in the Nutcracker as a child, or your little sister has been. Until proven otherwise. And no matter how big or small your town is, this is the case in America. So in America, the equivalent of this piece in Holland, in America that piece is the Nutcracker. Everybody knows the Nutcracker. Almost no piece I would play to my students in Connecticut that when I taught there, they would know. Beethoven, Bach, Brahms, Mendelssohn, you name it, the most famous and wonderful Mozart, nothing. But you would play, like, not even the tune, but just the introductory 2 notes of the Sugar Plum Fairy. Everybody. In Holland, this would be, I think, the other way around almost. So this piece we're playing today, this little movement from this bigger piece is so big a part of Dutch culture that I could not possibly not know it. But I know it for more reasons, and when I was quite little, I was quite often part of performances of this piece. And I hasten to add, not as page turner. Well, I'll let you think a little bit more. How about we play another tiny little bit from this piece? Would you like that?
Mm.
Yeah, because it's nice. It's likable, right? It's nice. You nurse you around. I suppose you mean like it's quite nice and appealing and interesting. Not maybe terribly Beethovenian sort of expressive, but nice enough, right? And there is a bit of a climax, right? Even in this little thing. But yeah, emotionally maybe a bit more controlled than say the Beethoven Ninth. Yeah, fair enough. Pieces have in common.
Well, they both finish the same way.
They both finish in the same, not finishing way, right? They both finish on what we call the dominant, right? They're not really at home in the end of this little movement, so there's room to go on, of course, and that's very much what the composer wants. I was almost saying it. What the composer wants with these two little movements. They're not at all endings, but you want to keep the story going. What do you think of this one? Better or worse than the first?
Well, I don't think those are the terms.
Well, I don't know, you make it up. Somebody said better. Somebody likes this better than the first? Because it's...
Well, it's just going further.
Ah!
It's got the same
length of sort,
but it's just going a little bit further.
it has a bit more sort of adventure
a
almost.
bit more complicated.
Yeah, a bit more to say. Yeah, okay. Is there anybody who likes the first one better? Yeah, me too. I love the first one. The second one also. I'll play the second one more time for you. Because it's so short, it's easy to play one more time. When I think about it, when I play this one more time, I find it very difficult to choose between the first and the second. There's different, of course, but both have their own appeal to me. I suppose in the end I picked the first, but both have something incredibly beautiful. What sort of music do you think it is originally?
Armidale? A ballet?
A ballet?
No?
Like a nutcracker, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, that's an interesting sort of idea. Gosh. That's a wonderful idea. I think maybe we should do that in Armidale or else in Holland. In Holland, you can do anything with this music because it's so well known. I'm sure you could make a ballet out of it. That would be hilarious. I think a lot of people would not like it, but Holland is such a liberal country. Used to be anyway, and maybe still is. And so I suppose anything goes in Amsterdam. So maybe you could actually do this, yes.
There was a ballet performance of that in Speyer at the...
Really? They did it?
Speyer Cathedral.
Oh my God. Yeah. Our German colleague knows, of course, what this, but he's kind enough not to tell us. But he says there was actually a ballet done on it in Germany. And I suppose Germany would maybe the place after the Netherlands where I thought something like that may have been done. I can imagine very different reactions to that, actually, especially in the cathedral.
So we're going to guess it's a hymn?
It's a hymn, yeah, but not really, right? I mean, it doesn't... No, one more time. Do you think it sounds like a hymn? some time, once I have a church job somewhere again, it may actually be possible. I may have to transpose it a little bit, I wonder. Yeah, probably. Down a little bit, right? And it may be good.
I was only picking up on the cathedral hint.
But in this bigger piece, of which we now have heard two little bits, there are hymns.
So it's an oratorio? No.
Yeah. In a broad sense. We're going to play you the piece that I actually wanted to play. And it's much more than a hymn. But it includes a hymn. And you know this hymn really well, or else you should. And this is a very different part of this bigger piece. And as I just gave away, it does have a hymn in it. And our cathedral organist friend knows this really well, I'm sure. But it's much more than that. And in some ways, this is maybe the most, I don't know, gripping movement, in some ways, of this whole big piece, for me at least. It's marvelous. And I have very, very strong memories of hearing this when I was 11, 12 years old in Amsterdam, with very, very, very fine, world-famous performers, singers and instrumentalists. So I cannot play it without thinking of that, even though I now look at this music very differently than I did then. Thankfully, of course, because we were very bad at that. And once again, I mean, this is like a theory test almost, right? Once again, this little part, or not so little, but somewhat little part of his bigger piece ends on the dominant once again, because once again we want to really go on to the next bit. The main question, I suppose, is did you recognize the hymn?
Yeah, but I can't remember what it's called. It's Bach.
Yes, it's a hymn. No, it's not a hymn written by Bach, but it's a hymn very frequently set by Bach, harmonized by Bach, used by Bach in different bigger works, like, as it were, oratorios. Requiem, no. But that is in some ways also not a bad sort of hint, not a bad suggestion.
It's a passion.
Passion. It's one of the two, all these three movements, all those three bits that we have played so far are part of the same setting of the Passion story, the Passion of Christ, of course. That story set to music by Bach. And Bach did that a number of times. We have only two versions that Bach did. One based on the story as it's told in the Gospel of Matthew, one as it's told in the Gospel of John. It looks like Bach did more, but we don't have it. All right. So these three bits are all from the St. Matthew Passion by Bach. And to give it away, to explain it all, the regal bit at the beginning comes from very early on in the piece and is remember the high priests are plotting to get Jesus, right? And they say, but let's not do it on the feast day because we get ourselves in trouble. Right? They say that. I'm paraphrasing, of course, now, but they say that. And that is the chorus of the high priests where they say that. Let's not do it on the feast day. Ja, nicht auf das Fest in German. And it's that. The second little bit that we did is likewise a chorus of a group of people saying something, in fact asking a question of Jesus. Where would you like us to organize Easter supper? Yeah. And then he explains to them, blah, blah, blah. But it's that little chorus. So those two earlier ones were little choruses that are part of the gospel story. But the tradition has been, in classical music, that if many people talk in the Passion story, then you let it be sung by a choir, by a group of people. Right? So the high priest, in fact, is in this case Bach's two choruses together, Bach's two choirs together, double choir. And the disciples asking where should we prepare Easter supper is one of the two choirs, and of course instruments. And but one of the fascinating things about playing this music in this arrangement for me is that in a way I could fool you into believing it was almost anything else, right? Because there's no singing, there's no words. It's now only the music, very black and white, if you will. No instruments either. And it's just the music. Now, of course, I have every word in my head, and I'm sure Lena to quite an extent does too, when we're playing this. But of course, you can know this if you don't happen to know the music, like I know my colleague there does. So I find that really interesting, and that for me is one of the incredibly appealing aspects of playing such transcriptions, as Lena and I have been doing all the time. Beethoven symphonies, Bach concertos, and now we lately have been playing around with the Bach St. Matthew Passion. And it's this marvelous, 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 I think, we both think, arrangement for piano duet by this late 19th century German composer, Jadassohn. I forget his first name And Jadassohn was interestingly Jewish and a very fine pianist and organist and choral director who had some difficulty getting work in Christian churches, as you can imagine. He was, I believe, for many years organist of the synagogue in Leipzig, had a big choir in the community there, I believe. But anyway, he was obviously a great lover of Bach's music, and he was good with piano duet transcriptions, as so many 19th century composers were, because it was an easy way of making a little bit of money, sort of writing music, but not quite maybe your own music. Yeah? So if you were not quite so successful as a composer, you did maybe quite a bit of arranging. But I think also people like Jadassohn did this because they liked doing it, and because I think also there was something else in it for them than money. Namely, imagine taking the whole of the St. Matthew Passion and arranging, not every bit, but most bits for piano duet. What will happen after you finish? Or what happens while you're doing that, and what has happened by the time you finish?
You know the music very well.
Yes! You get to know the music really, really well! And I think that worked for Jadassohn. In fact, he did not only do a piano duet version, but also a piano solo version. This is of course not the same as making a vocal score, where you put all the instruments of the orchestra together for a pianist to play. A piano solo version meant also the singing parts. You know? So you can play it for yourself and hear sort of the whole piece. Right? I have not looked yet at that piano solo version. I want to do that too. But the piano duet thing is so nice. From the beginning we said, well, in a way this is so easy to play. You can so imagine two pianists in the 1880s, 1890s in Germany getting together and playing this Matthew Passion and getting to know it. Before maybe you go to hear a performance. If you ever had a chance to hear a performance. Of course, you know, no CDs, remember, not even vinyl. And performances of these big pieces were not so frequent yet. Interestingly, I think that musical culture, in some ways, is a bit comparable to the culture we have here in Armidale. It would be very, very difficult to mount a performance of the St. Matthew Passion with choir, orchestra, soloists, and so forth. We just don't have those people here, it looks like, right? And so I think that's one function for us, playing these bits on piano duet. You can get to know it from a live performance, and at the same time there's all these beautiful things that it is different from the original, and therefore gives you a different sort of look at it. And for me, it has been getting to know a very old friend in a completely different light that I almost did not realize was there. It's been strikingly interesting. The last bit we played, what do you think that was? There was the hymn in the middle, right? Maybe not everybody has heard it, but we'll play a bit of that hymn to just show you where it is. Something else. And that's, I'm not sure if it's typically Bach, but it was often done by Bach. He often used a hymn in a different sort of piece and just gluing in lines of that hymn in that bigger piece. And that's what he does here. And in the Matthew Passion, Bach could do that even more effectively because the whole thing was arranged for two groups of singers and players. So, in this case, the second chorus, if you will, sings that hymn in bits and pieces. And the first chorus, the first group, provides one tenor soloist and instruments singing a particular poetic text that hymn, in a way, relates to.
Could you glue the bits back together?
Yeah. You see it?
No.
So,
I mean, I can tell which was which.
that's what I mean. Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah. So there's a guy singing, and these instruments supporting it, and then he sort of stops. And the camera moves to the other choir, right? And now you see this chorale responding to that text. What do you think is the most striking element of the music? Many things, of course. Play one more.
The bass.
The bass.
Pom, pom, pom.
What do you think that means? What do you think this composer... But we know it's Bach by now, right? Yeah, okay, Bach. What do you think Bach is trying to say with those...
It's a bass.
It's a bass, yes, but what sort of a thing outside music does he want to hint at with those bass notes? I think so. The heartbeat. And what kind of heartbeat is this, you think?
Well, in the grip of some emotion, but fear?
Whatever, yes, I think fear, yes, whatever it is. But obviously it's a stressed out heartbeat, right? Yeah, this is not like easy go, phew, nice. I got the waterfalls, a nice walk, you know. It's not that sort of thing. This is a heartbeat under stress. Yes? The words here, the tenor sings, oh, pain, oh sorrow, oh, Schmalz. Here trembles the suffering heart. And
Tortured.
the tortured heart, thank you so much. The tortured heart, gekwälte Hart, yes, absolutely right. And then the choir, with that hymn, responds, and in fact responds, asks, what is the reason for that suffering? And the tenor goes on with what he says, all this terrible stuff happening, of course, to Jesus in the gospel story, in the Passion story. And that's very interesting. That's how this sort of genre works theologically. Then the choir responds with the second line of the hymn, you see, my sin hath beaten you. This is, you like it or not, 18th century theology. We all made Christ suffer on the cross. You can look at this any way you like. But that's how the Matthew Passion and Bach looked at it in these arias, you might say. It's of course not part of the gospel story, but it reflects on it. The Matthew Passion tells the whole story, but at certain times, moments, reflects, as it were, like a bit of a mini sermon on what has just been happening. And the way Bach does that is with a soloist singing poetic text and or a hymn, carefully chosen which verse from which hymn reflects exactly that moment. And here, poetic text and a hymn are combined. It's almost like one minister, if you will, one pastor, reflecting on what happens in the gospel in a mini sermon, and the congregation responding with a hymn verse. All in that one little movement. I think it's marvelous. You hear everything in black and white because of our piano duo transcription, but the instruments that accompany the singer in the beginning are in fact recorders. This typical, and no instrument, no, recorders are only used once in the Matthew Passion, only there. And the recorders are accompanied by English horns, by low oboes. This is this strange instrumental quality of these high recorders, quite, in a way, a bit bleak sounding, and those low, melancholy English horns. It's a marvelous movement. And we're going to play it one more time. How's that? Fascinating, don't you think? I found this arrangement completely by chance, if such a thing exists, on the web. There is a big website. People say it's bigger than Google Books, IMSLP, where you find things like this. People upload it and want a copy, and there it is. And we went through some trouble creating our own sort of printed copy of the book, so we could actually play from it and turn pages and actually read it big enough. But we have sorted that out now for the first half of the Matthew Passion. Now the second half we still have to do. But in some ways, I would like to invite you to look at today's performance as another sneak preview today of a complete performance of the Matthew Passion for piano duet that I hope will happen in Armidale within a few months or something. Because we're dying to play the whole thing together and to let you share in the joy, if that's appropriate, for the Matthew Passion. We just think it's marvelous music, and both of them have, I think, very strong memories of hearing this music many times in Europe, in Germany and in Holland, and it's so nice to hear this music in different ways. Partly, I suppose, the joy is that playing this music is almost any music is always much more than just listening to it. And people who play the piano, even a little bit, know that, right? It means so much more.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you don't play an instrument yet, then let me know and I can help you start. So this is, in fact, a recitative, or you can call it a little aria, arioso, for tenor, oboes, recorders, and then the second choir responding with this hymn. From the St. Matthew Passion, it's about 2/3 in the first half of the whole Matthew Passion, and that first half, of course, would be the part that you hear before the sermon, an hour and a half of music. Then the minister has his thing, he can preach for an hour or two, and then if you're still alive, you can listen to the second half of the Matthew Passion. How they worked out on Good Fridays, I have no idea. I really don't know how this worked in practical terms. But they spent, I suppose, lots of time in church. And with, as long as Bach's music was played, I suppose there were worse things to do than spending time in church on Good Friday. called a cliffhanger. Right? And we have the next bit, but we're over time already. So we're going to do it another time. Thank you so much. This was my choice for this week. Movements, bits and pieces from this piano duet transcription by Jadassohn, the German late 19th century composer Jadassohn, of the Matthew Passion by J.S. Bach. My colleague in the Armidale piano duo is Lena Schmalz. I'm Jan-Piet Knijff, and I'm so grateful to my friend Hideko Scott for making these recordings of Jan-Piet's choice, and this will now be the second one on YouTube. I hope so. Thank you very much. Thank you.